My name is Audrey, and I came into this world as an afterthought, born to parents who were already in their late 60s and had a successful 42-year-old daughter they considered more than enough. We never planned on having you, my mother Diana would often say during our video calls, not with malice but with a matter-of-fact tone that somehow made it worse. If it wasn't for your grandparents. She'd trail off, leaving the implications hanging in the digital silence between us. The unspoken truth was clear. I existed because my maternal grandparents had convinced my reluctant parents to have another child. Victoria, my sister, was already deep into her real estate career when I arrived. She wasn't cruel, she simply acted as if I didn't exist in our spacious suburban home. While I played with my tablet in the corner of our shared living room, she'd be sprawled on the designer couch, making endless calls about property listings and market trends, completely oblivious to my presence. "Victoria, honey, don't forget your open house materials," Mom would say, carefully arranging her premium marketing folders. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting at the kitchen table, struggling with my math homework, but help rarely came. Instead, they developed a routine that defined my entire childhood. Every morning, they'd drop me off at my grandparents' modest but welcoming ranch house. "You wanted her," my father Kenneth would say to my grandfather, car keys dangling from his fingers as he checked his smartwatch, already running late for his consulting job. "She's all yours." My grandparents' house became my real home. They picked me up from school in their reliable old Volvo, helped me with my homework at their well-worn kitchen table, took me to the neighborhood park with its creaking swings, and made sure I was fed and cared for. Only late at night would my parents come to collect me, usually looking exhausted and slightly annoyed at having to make the trip. "Audrey," my grandmother would say, hugging me goodbye each night, her lavender perfume wrapping around me like a comfort blanket, "you're the best thing that ever happened to us." And in those moments, wrapped in her warm embrace, I could almost forget that I wasn't wanted elsewhere. This pattern continued day after day, year after year. While Victoria prepared for her ambitious career in real estate, I learned to navigate life as an afterthought in my own home. But my grandparents' love was constant, unwavering, and it was in their cozy ranch house that I learned what it meant to be truly valued. One day, my grandfather would tell me as we worked through my science homework at their kitchen table, the afternoon sun casting warm shadows through the lace curtains my grandmother had hung decades ago, "You'll understand that sometimes the best things in life aren't planned." He'd wink at me over his reading glasses, and for a moment, the weight of being unwanted would lift from my small shoulders. With Victoria focused on her struggling real estate career, I thought things might change at home. Maybe my parents would finally see me, the daughter who remained. I couldn't have been more wrong. "Audrey," my mother's voice would reach me through the house's smart speaker system before I could even set down my backpack after school, "the house needs cleaning. Start with the bathrooms." What had once been Victoria's chores now became mine, along with a host of new responsibilities. The washing machine became my constant companion, and I learned all its cycles and settings by heart, the mechanical hum a soundtrack to my teenage years. The housework seemed endless, a never-ending cycle of duties that left me exhausted. "You live here, you need to contribute," my father would say whenever I showed the slightest hesitation, his eyes never leaving his iPad screen. "Your sister always did her part when she lived here." By the time I was 14, I had graduated from cleaning to cooking. It wasn't a gradual transition. One day my mother simply stopped preparing meals. "You're old enough now," she announced one morning over her virtual business meeting. "We expect dinner ready when we get home from work." That first night, I made spaghetti, following a recipe I found online. It was slightly overcooked, but edible. My parents ate in silence, then my father looked up from his phone. "Tomorrow, try something with chicken," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion but an order. My only escape was dreaming about college. Every night after finishing the dishes, I'd retreat to my room and immerse myself in university websites, my laptop screen illuminating my hopes for the future. I'd imagine myself walking across different campuses, far away from the endless chores and cold silences of home, my mind filled with possibilities in the medical technology field that fascinated me. Then, when I was 16, Victoria came home with news that changed everything. She burst through the front door one Sunday afternoon, dragging a tall, well-dressed man behind her. "Mom, Dad," she squealed, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors, "this is Nathan. We're engaged." You'd think someone had just announced they'd won the lottery. My parents literally jumped from their ergonomic office chairs, my mother crying tears of joy while clutching her iPad. My father was already pulling out his phone to call relatives. "We'll pay for everything," my mother declared, hugging Victoria. "Our first daughter's wedding has to be perfect." The wedding preparations consumed our house for months. Every conversation revolved around flowers, venues, and guest lists. Money seemed to flow like water: designer dresses, premium vendors, top-tier everything. My grandparents attended the wedding but seemed uncomfortable with the extravagance. I caught my grandmother frowning at the ice sculpture that probably cost more than a semester of college tuition. Grandfather just shook his head at the champagne fountain, but they kept their thoughts to themselves, though I could read the concern in their eyes. 2 years later, I sat at our dinner table, 3 college acceptance letters spread before me. After years of playing household manager while maintaining straight A's, I'd been accepted to all my top choices, including their prestigious biomedical engineering programs. My heart raced as I told my parents the good news, hope rising in my chest despite years of experience that should have taught me better. "That's nice," my mother said, not looking up from her social media feed, "but we can't pay for it. We spent all our savings on your sister's wedding, even took out a loan for it. There's nothing left for college." "But you paid for Victoria's college," I stammered, my fingers trembling on the acceptance letters. "That was different," my mother replied, finally looking up. "We saw potential in her." The silence at the dinner table was deafening. After my mother's words about potential, I sat there, the acceptance letters suddenly feeling heavy in my hands, as my parents continued scrolling through their phones as if they hadn't just shattered my dreams. "You should get a job," my father said between checking his email notifications. "Save up some money, take out student loans. That's what responsible adults do." I left the table without being excused, something I'd never dared to do before. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and called my grandmother. Within minutes, I was walking through their familiar front door, tears streaming down my face. The smell of my grandmother's lavender hand cream and my grandfather's old leather armchair wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. "Oh, sweetheart," my grandmother pulled me into a hug while I told them everything between sobs, my words tumbling out between gasps. My grandfather's face grew stern as he listened, but there was a glimmer in his eyes that I couldn't quite read. When I finished, they exchanged a knowing look, the kind I'd seen them share countless times over years of family dinners and holiday gatherings. "Audrey," my grandfather said, taking my hand in his weathered one, "we've been expecting something like this." "What do you mean?" I asked, wiping my eyes with the tissue my grandmother had pressed into my hand. "We've watched how they've treated you all these years," my grandmother explained, her voice gentle but firm. "How they spent money on Victoria's education, her extravagant wedding. We knew they might do this to you." My grandfather stood up, his joints creaking slightly as he made his way to his study. When he returned, he was holding a leather folder that looked well-worn but carefully maintained. "We've been saving for your education since the day you were born," he said, opening the folder to reveal bank statements and investment documents. You can choose any of those 3 colleges. We've got you covered. Every penny. That night, I went home and packed my things. Not everything, just what I needed: my laptop, some clothes, my cherished medical technology textbooks, and the few photos I had of my grandparents and me. My parents were in the living room, both absorbed in their separate screens, when I told them I was moving in with my grandparents. "Whatever you think is best," my mother said, her eyes never leaving her tablet where she was reviewing Victoria's latest property listings. Was that relief I heard in her voice? The next few weeks were a blur of college preparations. I chose to study biomedical engineering with a focus on financial management, driven by a desire to understand both the human and business aspects of medical technology. Somehow, watching my parents' mismanagement of money while ignoring basic human connections had sparked an interest in doing things the right way. My grandparents helped me with every detail, from filling out financial aid forms to buying supplies for my dorm room. When I finally started classes that fall, it felt like stepping into a new world. The material was challenging but fascinating. Each lecture on medical devices and healthcare economics felt like a step away from my old life and toward something meaningful. My professors noticed my unique perspective, combining technical knowledge with financial insight, and soon I was staying after class to discuss healthcare innovation and market dynamics. For the first time in my life, someone besides my grandparents saw potential in me, real potential. My understanding of both medical technology and financial management seemed to open doors I never knew existed. My second year of college was in full swing when my grandmother called with some interesting news about Victoria. "Your sister's having trouble," she said during one of our weekly video calls, her face pixelated but her concern clear. "Her real estate career isn't taking off like she hoped, and Nathan can't seem to hold down a consulting job. They're constantly asking your parents for money." I wasn't surprised when she told me they were getting it. "Your mother emptied her retirement account last month to help them with rent," my grandmother sighed, adjusting her reading glasses. "They just can't say no to her." A year later, the situation got worse. Victoria and Nathan couldn't make rent anymore, even with our parents' constant financial support. They moved back into my old bedroom, the one I'd spent years keeping spotlessly clean. The irony wasn't lost on me as I saw Victoria's social media posts showing her cozy new home office, carefully angled to hide the peeling wallpaper I remembered. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My professors had helped me land internships at prestigious medical device companies, where I discovered I had a natural talent for understanding both the technical and financial aspects of healthcare innovation. Each challenging project, from analyzing cost-effectiveness of new medical technologies to developing financial strategies for patient access programs, made me more certain I'd chosen the right path. "You have an exceptional ability to balance business acumen with healthcare impact," my supervisor at MedTech Solutions told me during my performance review. "We'd love to have you join our executive training program after graduation." I kept my head down and focused on my studies, barely thinking about my family except during video calls with my grandparents. But when I visited them during my senior year, I knew something was wrong the moment I walked through their door. My grandmother's usual warm smile seemed forced, and my grandfather, usually quick with a joke about his latest gardening project, sat quietly in his familiar armchair. The house felt heavy with unspoken words. "What's wrong?" I asked over dinner, watching them push food around their plates. "And don't tell me it's nothing. I know you both too well." They exchanged a look I'd seen too many times before, the one that meant they were trying to protect me from something. Finally, my grandfather spoke, his voice unusually tired. "Your parents came to see us last week," he said, setting down his fork. "They wanted their inheritance early." What do you mean? I put down my spoon, my stomach churning. They're in trouble with the banks, my grandmother explained, her hands twisting her napkin. Multiple loans, credit card debt. They said they needed $200,000 to avoid bankruptcy. And you gave it to them? I couldn't keep the anger from my voice. My grandfather nodded, looking older than I'd ever seen him. We had to, Audrey. They're still our daughter and son-in-law, despite everything. It was most of your savings. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. After everything they've done? After how they keep enabling Victoria's irresponsible spending? After how they treated me? Sweetheart, my grandmother reached across the table to take my hand, her touch as comforting as ever. We know you're angry, but what's done is done. We'll be fine. But my anger kept building. My parents, who'd never had money for my education, who'd treated me like a live-in maid, had the audacity to demand money from the only people who'd ever truly cared for me, all because they couldn't say no to Victoria and couldn't manage their own finances. The injustice of it burned in my chest. My hard work paid off. After graduation, with glowing recommendations from my professors and impressive internship experiences in medical technology finance, I landed a position as a financial analyst at MedTech Solutions, one of the leading medical device companies in the country. The starting salary was more than I'd ever dreamed of making. I found a modest but modern apartment in a safe neighborhood, nothing fancy, but mine. Every morning, I'd wake up grateful that I didn't have to cook breakfast for anyone but myself. My career flourished as I threw myself into each new challenge, from developing pricing strategies for life-saving devices to creating financial assistance programs for patients in need. My unique combination of healthcare knowledge and financial expertise earned me rapid promotions and performance bonuses that my younger self couldn't have imagined. Within a few years, I had advanced to Director of Financial Operations and had enough saved for a down payment on my own house. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I couldn't help but think of my parents in Victoria, who'd never managed their money well enough to buy property despite their real estate ambitions. Not that they knew about my success, we hadn't spoken in years, though I occasionally saw Victoria's carefully curated social media posts about her thriving real estate business. Then came the call that changed everything. My grandfather had suffered a massive heart attack. By the time I rushed to the hospital, still wearing my business suit from an important board meeting, he was gone. My grandmother, who'd been by his side for over 50 years, seemed to lose her spark after that. Less than 2 months later, she followed him, leaving me truly alone for the first time in my life. I was arranging my grandmother's funeral at the upscale memorial home when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Audrey, do you want some help with the arrangements? I turned to find my mother standing there, looking older and more tired than I remembered, her designer clothes slightly worn at the edges. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, but something in her expression, perhaps genuine grief, made me hesitate. Sure, I heard myself say, surprising us both. That would be nice. Over the next few days, as we planned the service, my parents began to open up. They were struggling, they admitted. Retirement hadn't been kind to them financially. We barely make ends meet, my father confessed one afternoon while we were selecting flowers, his once proud posture now slightly stooped. And with Victoria's twins. Twins? This was news to me, though I shouldn't have been surprised they hadn't told me. Yes, Lucas and Owen, my mother jumped in, pulling out her phone to show me photos. Such beautiful boys, 7 years old now, but they need so much. Victoria and Nathan still can't manage on their own, so we help where we can. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral as I looked at the smiling faces on her screen. Some things never changed. A week after we laid my grandmother to rest, we gathered in a wood-paneled office at Thompson and Associates for the reading of the will. I sat across from my parents, with Victoria and Nathan slouched in chairs beside them, both looking uncomfortable in their slightly outdated business attire. The room smelled of old leather and furniture polish, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The attorney, Mr. Patterson, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and began reading in a measured voice. I expected the usual legal terminology, but what came next made everyone sit up straight. To our beloved granddaughter, Audrey, he read, his voice clear in the hushed room, we leave our house at 1542 Maple Street and the sum of $150,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's perfectly maintained facade cracked as her mouth fell open, and my mother gripped my father's arm so hard her manicured nails left marks on his sleeve. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and continued, and a personal note from Mr. Henderson to his daughter, Diana. He looked at my mother over his glasses. The note reads, Diana, remember that we gave you $200,000 when you needed it most. This is our final decision, and we trust you will respect it as we respected your needs. My mother's face flushed red, then pale. My father stared at the floor, while Victoria and Nathan exchanged worried glances, their financial lifeline suddenly threatened. After the attorney finished and gathered his papers into his leather briefcase, my parents approached me in the parking lot. The polite demeanor they'd shown during the funeral arrangements was gone, replaced by barely concealed desperation. Audrey, honey, my mother began, her voice trembling beneath its practiced smoothness, you have to understand, we always thought we'd inherit the house. We were counting on it. We're struggling. The mortgage, Victoria's family's expenses, we could really use the house, my father added, running his hand through his thinning gray hair. I looked at them both, remembering all the years of neglect, the constant reminders that I wasn't wanted, the refusal to help with my education while they drained their accounts for Victoria. No, I said firmly, adjusting my designer blazer, a symbol of the success I'd achieved without their help. The house is mine. That's what Grandma and Grandpa wanted. They continued pleading, following me to my Tesla Model 3, but I stood firm. Victoria joined in too, her real estate agent persona slipping as she talked about how her boys needed a yard to play in, but I simply got in my car and drove away. A week later, my phone lit up with my mother's contact info. Her voice sounded different when I answered, humbled, perhaps. She was asking me to come over for dinner. Against my better judgment and my executive assistant's carefully managed schedule, I agreed. Pulling up to my childhood home was like stepping back in time, except everything looked shabbier than I remembered. The paint was peeling, the gutters sagged, and the once pristine lawn was patchy and overgrown. Inside, the house was crowded but clean. Lucas and Owen, Victoria's twins, ran circles around the living room while Nathan half-heartedly told them to settle down from behind his laptop. The boys were cute. They had Victoria's carefully maintained appearance and Nathan's unruly curly hair. Audrey, my mother smiled, pulling me into an awkward hug. We made your favorite, pot roast. That's not my favorite, I said automatically, my voice steady. That's Victoria's favorite. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken by my father clearing his throat. Well, why don't you tell us what your favorite food is? We'd love to know. And surprisingly, they seemed genuinely interested. Over dinner, they asked about my job at MedTech Solutions, my modern apartment, my hobbies. They actually listened when I talked about my work in healthcare finance and medical technology innovation, though I could tell most of it went over their heads. That dinner led to another, then another. Soon, I was joining them for holidays, bringing educational toys for the twins, even helping the boys with their homework sometimes. When they mentioned the house needed repairs, I found myself offering to help, my financial expertise making me acutely aware of their deteriorating situation. I paid for a new HVAC system, fixed the crumbling foundation, repainted the exterior. Each time I transferred funds, my parents would tear up with gratitude. "You're too good to us," my mother would say, hugging me while standing in their newly renovated kitchen. "We don't deserve this." "You're right," I would think but never say aloud, because despite everything, despite all the years of hurt and neglect, some small part of me still wanted to believe people could change. The years passed, and my career at MedTech Solutions continued to flourish. Each promotion brought new opportunities to improve patient care through innovative financial solutions, and my investment portfolio grew substantially. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents seemed to strengthen. They were getting older, both were over 70 now, and I found myself wanting to do something meaningful for them. "I've been thinking," I said during one of our Sunday dinners, watching my father struggle to climb the stairs, "this house isn't really suitable for you anymore. I want to buy you a new house, something single-story, with wider doorways and better accessibility, but still with a nice garden. Something that would be comfortable for your retirement years." Their reaction surprised me, actual tears of joy, not the manufactured emotion I'd grown accustomed to seeing from them. We spent the next few weeks house hunting together and finally found the perfect place, a beautiful ranch-style home in a quiet neighborhood, designed for aging in place with all the modern amenities. After transferring a significant portion of my savings, my parents couldn't stop talking about how excited they were. "We need to have a proper housewarming party," my father declared, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Let us arrange everything. It's the least we can do." "That would be lovely," I agreed, planning to present them with the deed during the celebration. "Just let me know when." Weeks passed. Between managing major healthcare financing projects and developing new patient assistance programs, I was busy with work, but I kept expecting an invitation. When nothing came, I started asking about the date. "Oh, we're still planning," my mother would say during our video calls. "You know how these things take time. We want it to be perfect." "We'll let you know soon," my father would add, his face slightly pixelated on my screen. Something about their vague responses triggered a familiar feeling of unease. One evening, after another deflecting call from my mother, I found myself opening Instagram, where I wasn't connected with Victoria. I hadn't looked at her profile in years, having muted all family social media long ago. There it was, posted just hours ago with her signature real estate agent polish, so excited for Mom and Dad's amazing housewarming party this Saturday. "The house is absolutely gorgeous. Can't wait to celebrate with everyone. #new home, #family celebration, #luxury living." The post had dozens of comments from relatives and friends, all confirming their attendance. Her story showed decorations being set up, catering being arranged. This wasn't a last-minute gathering, this had been planned for weeks. My hand shaking slightly, I called my mother, years of executive presentations helping me keep my voice steady. "Hi, Mom," I maintained a casual tone. "Just checking in about the housewarming party. Have you set a date yet?" "Oh, honey, not yet," she replied smoothly, the lie flowing effortlessly. "Probably in a couple of weeks. We're still working out the details. We want everyone to be able to come." Everyone, except me, apparently. The irony of being excluded from a celebration of a house I had bought wasn't lost on me. That Saturday, I parked my Tesla a block away from the house I had purchased. Music and laughter drifted through the evening air. Through the large energy-efficient windows I'd specifically chosen for them, I could see dozens of people milling about, relatives I recognized, friends of my parents, Victoria's real estate network. The front door was unlocked, of course it was. They were expecting everyone except the person who actually owned the house. I slipped in quietly in my designer business suit, following the sound of my father's voice to the living room. And after all these years of hard work, we finally did it, he was saying to a group of attentive listeners, standing under the new LED recessed lighting I'd had installed. Bought our dream home. Don't forget about Victoria, my mother added proudly, gesturing with her wine glass. She helped so much with the down payment. Such a wonderful daughter, always taking care of her parents. Someone murmured sympathetically, and my mother nodded. You know, our younger daughter hasn't helped us at all, she said pointedly, adjusting her new smart home tablet. Probably too busy with her medical technology career to care about family. I stood in the doorway, heat rising to my face as I watched this performance. Victoria beamed beside them, her 7-year-old twins running between the guests in the space I'd carefully designed for aging accessibility. Here they were, celebrating in the house I bought with my hard-earned success in the very career they'd dismissed. Actually, I said loudly, making everyone jump, my voice carrying the authority I'd developed in countless boardroom presentations, I think you've got that backwards. The color drained from my parents' faces. Guests turned to stare at me, whispers rippling through the crowd like a wave. Audrey, my father recovered first, his smile tight. What a surprise! I'm sure it is, I replied, stepping into the room, my heels clicking against the premium flooring I'd selected, especially since you forgot to invite me to the housewarming party for the house I bought. Dead silence fell over the room. Nathan suddenly became very interested in his worn loafers, while Victoria's perfectly maintained real estate agent smile faltered. Well, my mother's voice had an edge to it, her wine glass trembling slightly. What's done is done. You bought it, yes, but it's ours now. You can't expect eternal gratitude. That's right, my father added, gaining confidence as he stood next to their new smart home control panel. And frankly, you're not welcome here. This is a family gathering, and Victoria and her family will be living here too, my mother announced, her voice rising. They've already sold their house. It's all arranged. I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, harsh sound that echoed off the newly painted walls. Reaching into my Prada briefcase, I pulled out a folder containing documents I'd prepared with the same meticulous attention I gave to my medical technology contracts. You seem to be confused about something, I said, opening the folder to reveal the deed and ownership papers. This house belongs to me. I never signed it over to you. I was planning to give it to you tonight, at what I thought would be a proper housewarming party. My mother's face went from pale to ashen. My father started to sputter, his hand gripping the marble countertop I'd specially ordered. Victoria's carefully crafted professional demeanor crumbled completely. And now I turned to address the stunned guests, using the same commanding tone I used in corporate presentations. Now, I'd like everyone to leave. This is my house, and the party's over. You can't do this, my mother's voice rose to a shriek, her perfect hostess facade shattering. We're your parents. No, I said quietly, my voice carrying the weight of years of executive decision-making. You're just the people who gave birth to me. My real parents, my grandparents, taught me that family means more than blood. They also taught me about financial responsibility, which is why I own this house, and you don't. They left in tears, my parents, Victoria, Nathan, the twins, and all their guests. I watched from the front porch as they drove away in their aging luxury cars, one by one, until the street was empty except for my Tesla parked around the corner. After a few weeks, I learned they'd used the money from selling their old house to rent a small apartment. Victoria, Nathan, and the twins moved in with them. They tried calling me, sending emails, reaching out through LinkedIn, but I blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media accounts. The house? I sold it a month later and donated the proceeds to a patient assistance program at MedTech Solutions, helping families afford life-saving medical devices. Someday I'll have my own children, and I promised myself they'll never have to earn my love or compete for my attention. Unlike my parents, I'll love my children equally and unconditionally, the way my grandparents loved me. My name is Vanessa, and at 32, I've dedicated the past decade to building my career at Morgan Stanley's investment banking division. While my younger sisters, Olivia and Camille, were focused on starting their families, I was climbing the corporate ladder, eventually reaching the position of vice president. Don't get me wrong, I love my job and the view from my corner office on the 47th floor of our Manhattan headquarters. But sometimes, during those late nights reviewing merger documents, I wonder if I missed out on something along the way. No husband, no kids, just me and my premium leather executive chair that probably costs more than my sister's monthly mortgage payments. It was a typical Tuesday morning when my phone lit up with Olivia's name. At 26, my youngest sister had always been the bubbly one, though her enthusiasm usually came with a price tag attached. I answered while sorting through a stack of IPO documents on my glass desk. "Hey V." Olivia's voice chirped through my iPhone's speaker. "Got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" I shuffled some confidentiality agreements aside, half listening as I reviewed our latest client's financials. "So, you know Mom's turning 60 in 2 months, right?" She paused for effect, a habit she'd perfected over years of asking for favors. "Well, we're planning something special and we need everyone to chip in." That got my attention. I set down my Mont Blanc pen, already dreading the number that was about to come out of her mouth. When Olivia named the figure, I nearly choked on my $7 artisanal coffee. It was more than my last business class flight to London, which, come to think of it, was just 3 months ago for a merger deal. "I know it's a lot," Olivia rushed to add, her voice taking on that sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "But it's for Mom, you know." No, it's fine," I said, already pulling up my banking app on my second monitor. "I'll transfer it right now." "Great. Oh, and one more thing, make sure you take a week off work for the celebration. Don't plan anything else for that time, okay?" I glanced at my calendar, already populated with board meetings and client presentations. "When exactly?" "We'll let you know," she said quickly. "Just keep your schedule flexible." The next few weeks flew by in a blur of merger negotiations and earnings reports. I'd occasionally wonder what my sisters were planning with all that money, but whenever I asked, they'd brush me off with vague responses. Eventually, work took over, and Mom's birthday slipped to the back of my mind, buried under quarterly projections and market analyses. Then came the Saturday dinner at my parents' house in Connecticut. We all gathered there, Mom and Dad, my sisters, Uncle Robert's family, including my cousins Gabriel and Isabel. The familiar chaos of family dinner surrounded us, Dad attempting to discuss the stock market, though he'd never worked in finance, Mom fussing over everyone's plates, the usual stuff. That's when Olivia dropped her bomb. "So," Olivia said, pushing her organic quinoa around her plate with calculated casualness, "we finally got everything arranged for Mom's birthday. We're all going to spend a week at the Four Seasons Resort in Vail." The table erupted in excited chatter. Mom was beaming, Dad was already talking about hitting the Black Diamond slopes, and my sisters were discussing which spa treatments they wanted to try first. "Why didn't anyone tell me earlier?" I asked, feeling that familiar outsider sensation creeping in. "I don't even have proper ski gear, and there's barely any time to get fitted now." The table got quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that falls in a boardroom right before someone gets fired. Mom cleared her throat, and I felt my stomach drop before she even opened her mouth. "Actually, honey," she said with that tone she used when she was about to ask for something that would cost me either money or time, usually both, "we were hoping you could do us all a huge favor and watch the kids while we're there." I stared at my family gathered around the mahogany dining table, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was all a joke, but the silence stretched on, broken only by the soft clink of sterling silver against Wedgwood china. "You want me to watch the kids?" I finally managed to say, my voice sounding as foreign as a hostile takeover bid. "All 5 of them?" My mind started counting them off automatically: Camille's toddler, Jason; Olivia's baby girl, Lucy; cousin Gabriel's twins, Tom and Anna; and Isabel's son, Pete. 5 kids under the age of 7. "Well, you're so good with them," Mom said as if that explained everything, adjusting her new tennis bracelet, a gift from Dad that probably cost what I spent on my first car. "They love their Aunt Vanessa." I looked around the table again, still hoping to see a hint of humor in someone's eyes. There was none, just expectant faces waiting for my usual yes, the same way my junior analysts waited for my approval on their financial models. "But that's not fair," I heard myself say, my voice carrying the same edge I used in tough negotiations. "I want to celebrate with everyone too. It's Mom's birthday." Camille, my 28-year-old sister, put down her fork with a sigh that reeked of condescension. "Come on, Vanessa, you'll be bored there anyway. It's going to be noisy and crowded. You're used to your quiet condo and your perfect routine." "Bored?" I repeated, feeling like I was defending a merger strategy to skeptical shareholders. "How would you know if I'd be bored?" "Well," she continued, exchanging knowing glances with Olivia like they were co-conspirators in a deal I wasn't privy to, "you're great with the kids, they adore you, and let's be honest, it's not like you need a break from family life." I felt my chest tighten, the same way it did before making million-dollar decisions. "What's that supposed to mean?" Olivia jumped in, her voice carrying that condescending tone she'd perfected since marrying into old money. "She just means that you don't have children or a husband to get away from. The rest of us need this break. I mean, you spend most of your time in that fancy office anyway, right?" The organic vegetables on my plate blurred as I blinked back tears. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I hadn't cried in the office when I made VP, and I wouldn't cry now. Instead, I quietly pushed back my chair, the sound echoing against the hardwood floors. "Vanessa," Mom's voice held a note of concern, but not enough to actually stop her from sipping her expensive Chardonnay. Without a word, I grabbed my Hermes bag from the counter and headed for the door. Nobody moved to stop me, nobody called out. The only sound that followed me was Mom's voice drifting from the dining room. "Don't worry, she'll come around. She always does. She knows what family means." As I walked to my Mercedes in the circular driveway, their voices faded behind me, already moving on to discussing ski instructors and winter wardrobes. The evening air was crisp against my face, helping to clear my head the same way a late-night walk through Manhattan did after a tough day at the office. 10 years of putting everyone else first, of being the responsible one, the reliable one, and this is what I got in return. The worst part wasn't even the babysitting request, it was the casualness with which they'd assumed I'd agree, the way they'd planned this whole thing without me, using my money, my time, my vacation days, without even asking, as if I was just another asset to be leveraged, not a member of the family to be included. I spent half the night pacing around my penthouse apartment, my Louboutins long discarded by the door, replaying every family dinner, every holiday, every moment when I dropped everything to help someone else. The memories came flooding back, each one taking on a new, darker meaning in light of tonight's events. There I was at 16, making dinner while Mom helped Camille with her homework, me at 18, turning down a spring break trip to Cancun with friends to watch Olivia while our parents took a weekend getaway to the Hamptons. At 21, working 2 internships during business school to help pay for Camille's private college tuition. The images kept coming year after year, sacrifice after sacrifice. Vanessa, can you watch Jason for a few hours? Camille's voice echoed in my head. I need to get my hair done at that new salon in Soho. Vanessa, would you mind taking the twins for the weekend? Gabriel's familiar request played back like a broken record. Isabel's overwhelmed with Pete, and you're so good with kids. Plus, your place is so much bigger than ours. I'd always said yes. Always. Even when I had crucial client meetings the next day, even when I was exhausted from 80-hour work weeks, I'd taken pride in being the reliable one, the responsible sister, the perfect daughter. Being the family's safety net had become as much a part of my identity as my career achievements. I collapsed onto my Italian leather sofa, the cool material a stark contrast to the warmth of the Manhattan lights twinkling through my floor-to-ceiling windows. The photo albums on my custom-built coffee table caught my eye. Family vacations where I was always the one behind the camera. Holiday gatherings where I was always in the kitchen while everyone else laughed in the living room. When was the last time someone had asked me what I wanted? It's not like you need a break from family life. Olivia's words kept echoing in my head as if my life, my career, my choices were somehow less valid because I wasn't married with children, as if all my sacrifices, the missed holidays, the late-night emergency babysitting, the small loans that were never repaid, meant nothing because they didn't fit their definition of what mattered. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned in my king-size bed, remembering how I'd worked through Wharton Business School on a scholarship, determined not to burden my parents financially, how I'd started my career immediately after graduation, helping to put both my sisters through their liberal arts colleges, all those late nights at the office climbing the corporate ladder, sending chunks of my salary home to help with family expenses. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't a confrontational person. You don't make VP in investment banking by burning bridges. There had to be a way to resolve this peacefully, to make them understand without causing a family rift. So, I did what I'd always done when there was a problem. I tried to fix it like I would approach a difficult merger. I waited until a reasonable hour on Sunday morning before picking up my phone. Mom answered on the third ring, probably just back from her tennis lesson. "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I did during board presentations. "I've been thinking about the Vail trip. Actually, I have a solution. I'll pay for a professional nanny service for all 5 kids. Top tier, fully vetted, with excellent references. That way, everyone can enjoy the celebration together." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a moment too long, like a pause before rejecting a proposal. "That won't work, Vanessa," Mom finally said, her voice tight. "We can't trust some stranger with the children. They're used to you." "Mom, I want to be part of the celebration too," I tried to explain, using my most persuasive client pitch voice. "I want to be there for your birthday. I could find the best childcare service in the city, someone with impeccable credentials." "You're not exactly a social butterfly," she cut me off, her voice sharp as a hostile takeover. "You'd probably be uncomfortable with all the noise and activity anyway. The children will keep you busy, and you enjoy spending time with them. It's perfect for everyone." The click of the call ending echoed in my ear before I could respond, reminiscent of doors closing after failed negotiations. I was still staring at my phone, processing my mother's abrupt hang-up, when it buzzed again. Olivia's name flashed across the screen. "How dare you?" she hissed before I could even say hello. "Mom just told me about your little suggestion about hiring a nanny. Are you trying to ruin everything?" I sat up straighter in my ergonomic office chair, my sister's hostile tone catching me off guard like an unexpected market crash. Ruin everything? I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. We already have a solution. Olivia's voice rose to a pitch that would make a fire alarm envious. Everything's planned, Vanessa, everything. And now you're being completely selfish, trying to change all our arrangements at the last minute. The accusation hit me like a failed IPO presentation. I'm being selfish? Yes, you are. We've been planning this for weeks. Everyone's excited. The Four Seasons is booked, the ski lessons are scheduled, the spa treatments are reserved, and now you want to throw a wrench in everything because you can't just do this one thing for the family? My hand started shaking, gripping my phone like it was the last share in a bullish market. One thing? Are you serious? You know what? If you ruin this trip for everyone, if you spoil Mom's birthday celebration, don't bother talking to me again. I mean it, Vanessa. The line went dead faster than a tech startup's funding. I sat there, stunned by my baby sister's threat, when my phone buzzed with incoming messages. This time from Camille. Family needs to stick together, her first text read. We all help each other out. Another message popped up. Remember when I watched your condo that weekend you went to London for work? And another, you're good with the kids. They love you. Why can't you just forget about being resentful and think about what's best for the family? My fingers flew across the keyboard as I replied, channeling the same precision I used in corporate emails. A real family doesn't take advantage of each other. A real family respects each other's wishes and includes everyone in their plans. A real family doesn't manipulate and guilt-trip each other. I watched the three dots appear and disappear several times, like a volatile stock price, but no response came. That's when it hit me, the way they'd asked for money without explaining what it was for, the careful way they told me to take time off work without mentioning the Four Seasons, the casual way they'd announced their plans at dinner as if everything was already set in stone. They'd planned this all along, executing it with the precision of a hostile takeover. While I was working late nights, while I was babysitting their kids, while I was being the perfect daughter and sister, they were secretly arranging this trip. They'd used my money, arranged my schedule, and planned to dump 5 children on me without so much as a conversation. And now that I wasn't playing along with their script, they were trying every manipulation tactic they could think of, guilt, threats, emotional blackmail, to force me back into the box they'd created for me. Something strange happens when you finally see through the fog of manipulation. It's like when a complex market pattern suddenly becomes clear. Everything snaps into focus. I felt lighter than I had in years, like I'd just closed the biggest deal of my career. The guilt that had been weighing me down was replaced by something else, determination. I opened my laptop, the same one I used to make million-dollar decisions, and started searching. Within an hour, I had booked a suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Grand Cayman. Nothing too extravagant by my standards, but it had a private balcony overlooking 7 Mile Beach and a dedicated concierge. I even upgraded to first class on my favorite airline. After all, I had plenty of money since I wouldn't be skiing at Vail. The next few days at the office were surprisingly peaceful. My family had stopped calling and texting, probably assuming I was home preparing for a week of childcare, maybe buying extra organic snacks and planning educational activities. The thought made me smile as I packed my resort wear and new swimsuits from Neiman Marcus. Taking a tropical vacation in the middle of winter, my colleague Jessica asked when she saw me checking the Cayman Islands weather forecast between client calls. Sometimes you need to do something unexpected, I replied, surprised by how good it felt to say those words out loud, like announcing a successful merger. The morning of my flight, I took one last look around my penthouse. I'd cleaned everything meticulously, force of habit, I suppose. The empty Sub-Zero fridge, the properly locked floor-to-ceiling windows, everything in perfect order, just like my investment portfolios. Except this time, I wouldn't be here to answer any desperate phone calls for emergency babysitting. As the plane took off, I switched off my phone and tucked it into my Bottega Veneta bag. No social media, no email, no family drama. Just me, the Caribbean, and a whole week of freedom that I'd earned with every late night at the office and every sacrificed weekend. The Cayman air hit me like a warm embrace when I stepped out of the airport. Palm trees swayed in the breeze, and I could smell the salt from the ocean, even from here. My suite was even better than the pictures online. The balcony offered a perfect view of the endless blue horizon, and I could hear the waves crashing against the pristine white sand. That first afternoon, I walked barefoot on the beach, letting the warm sand squeeze between my toes, a far cry from the marble floors of my office building. When was the last time I'd done something like this? When was the last time I'd done anything just for me? I swam in the infinity pool, read a novel that wasn't a business book without interruption, and had dinner at a quiet oceanfront restaurant where no one needed me to cut their food or clean up their spills. I watched the sunset from my balcony, sipping a glass of vintage champagne without a single thought about bedtime routines or morning schedules. For the first time in years, my time was truly my own. My last morning in Grand Cayman, I savored my final moments of peace over fresh fruit and coffee on my balcony. I knew I'd have to turn my phone back on eventually, face whatever chaos I'd left behind, but I hadn't expected quite what I found. When my phone finally powered up, it started buzzing nonstop, messages, voicemails, calls, hundreds of them. The timestamp showed they started exactly a week ago, early in the morning. My hands trembled slightly as I began scrolling through them, like reviewing a particularly volatile market report. The first messages were from Olivia. "Where are you?" "We're outside your condo." Then Camille, "Vanessa, open the door. The kids are getting restless." Gabriel, "Hey, we brought Tom and Anna like planned. Are you home?" Isabel, "Vanessa, what's going on?" "Pete's asking for his Auntie V." As I read through the messages, I could picture the scene perfectly. My sisters and cousins standing outside my empty penthouse with 5 confused children, their Louis Vuitton luggage packed for the resort, their carefully laid plans crumbling around them like a failed investment strategy. The tone of the messages changed quickly from confusion to panic. "Vanessa, this isn't funny. Where are you? Pick up your phone. What are we supposed to do with the kids? You can't just disappear like this." Then came the anger. Olivia's messages turned nasty. "You selfish witch. We had to cancel our spa appointments because of you." Camille wasn't much better. "I can't believe you're this immature. Mom's birthday is ruined because of you. All our deposits at the Four Seasons are non-refundable." My Aunt Susan's messages made me wince. I'd never seen her use that kind of language before, especially not in a text. "You ungrateful little brat. You've ruined everything. These children were counting on you." Mom's messages started later in the day. "I'm so disappointed in you, Vanessa. I never thought you'd be this selfish after everything we've invested in your education." Dad, who rarely texted, had sent just one message: "Your mother is crying. I hope you're happy with yourself." The voicemails were worse. I could hear the anger, the disappointment, the accusations in their voices. Messages from extended family members I hadn't talked to in months suddenly appeared, all of them condemning my behavior. The family grapevine was apparently more efficient than Wall Street's fastest trading algorithms. "You've always been so reliable. How could you do this to your own family? Those poor children. You've ruined everything." I sat there in my peaceful suite, reading message after message, learning exactly what my family thought of me when I finally stopped being their convenient solution. The words they used, the names they called me, the assumptions they made about my character, it was like discovering a long-running fraud in a seemingly perfect company. Without responding to any of them, I packed my bags and headed to the airport. It was time to go home, but I wasn't the same Vanessa who had left a week ago. That Vanessa might have apologized, might have felt guilty, might have tried to make it up to everyone. But that Vanessa was gone, like a retired market strategy. I had just finished unpacking my resort wear when I heard the aggressive pounding on my front door. Before I could even reach it, I heard a key turning in the lock, the emergency key I'd given my mother years ago, just in case. They burst in like angry shareholders at a hostile takeover meeting, Mom leading the charge, Camille and Olivia flanking her sides, all of them red-faced and wild-eyed. The peaceful feeling I'd cultivated in Cayman evaporated instantly. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Olivia screamed, stepping forward in her designer heels. "You ruined everything. Everything." I stood my ground in my own penthouse foyer, watching them unleash their fury in my living room, the same living room where I'd babysat their children countless times, where I'd cancelled my own plans to accommodate their emergencies, where I'd always been the reliable one. Mike and John refused to stay with the kids, Camille spat out, referring to their husbands. They both suddenly had important business to take care of. So Olivia had to stay home with all 5 children while we went to Vail. She missed Mom's birthday because of you. The whole trip was ruined, Mom added, her voice rising above the hum of my climate control system. Nobody could enjoy themselves at the Four Seasons. All we did was talk about how you betrayed us, how you let everyone down. Your father couldn't even focus on his ski lessons, he was so upset. They continued their tirade, talking over each other, each one trying to outdo the others in expressing their disappointment and anger. The more they talked, the more absurd it all seemed, until something inside me broke, but not in the way they expected. I started laughing. The sound of laughter cut through their accusations like a perfectly timed market short. They stopped mid-sentence, staring at me as if I'd lost my mind. "What's so funny?" Mom demanded, her face flushing darker than her expensive highlights. What could possibly be funny about this situation? Mom's voice trembled with rage. I wiped tears of laughter from my eyes, feeling as confident as I did closing multi-million-dollar deals. "Don't you see how ridiculous this is? Do you really not understand how absurd you all sound right now?" "Absurd?" Camille sputtered. "What's absurd about you?" "Secretly planned this entire trip," I interrupted, my voice carrying the same authority I used in board meetings. "You decided, without asking me, that I would watch your children. You took my money, told me to take time off work, and then just assumed I would fall in line with your plans. And now that everything fell apart because of your assumptions, you're here calling me the villain?" "But you've always helped before," Mom said, her voice smaller now, confused, like a client realizing their strategy had fatal flaws. "You've never said no." "And that's exactly the problem," I cut in. "Because I always helped, you started taking advantage of me. You stopped seeing me as a daughter or a sister and started seeing me as free childcare. You stopped considering my feelings, my plans, my life. I became nothing more than an asset in your portfolio." "That's not true," Olivia protested, but her voice lacked conviction, like a weak market defense. "Really?" I raised an eyebrow, channeling my best negotiation stance. "Then why didn't you include me in the planning? Why didn't you ask me if I wanted to go to Vail? Why did you just assume I'd be happy to stay behind with 5 children while everyone else celebrated?" I watched their faces, hoping to see some recognition, some understanding of how they'd treated me. Instead, I saw their expressions harden like closing prices at the end of a bad trading day. "You're being selfish," Mom said, her voice cold. "You've ruined my birthday. You've hurt your sisters. You've disappointed the children. This isn't how I raised you." I felt the last thread of hope snap like a broken contract. "No, Mom, you're the ones being selfish. This whole situation is your fault, not mine." Mom drew herself up to her full height, her face like stone. "If that's how you feel, then perhaps I don't have a daughter named Vanessa anymore." "If that's what you want, Mom," I said quietly, with the same finality I used when terminating unsuccessful deals, "then so be it." It's been 6 weeks since that final confrontation in my penthouse, 6 weeks of silence broken only by the occasional notification when one of my family members makes another thinly veiled post on social media. "Some people only think about themselves," Mom wrote last week on her perfectly curated Instagram, followed by a dozen sympathetic comments from relatives and family friends who only know her version of the story. "Family should always come first," Olivia posted yesterday with a photo of her daughter in a designer baby outfit. "So blessed to have people in my life who understand what that really means." #blessed #family first. Camille's latest was a long paragraph about toxic people who destroy family bonds with their selfishness. She didn't tag me, of course, but everyone in our social circle knew who she was talking about. A few months ago, these posts would have devastated me like a market crash. I would have spent hours crafting responses in my head, losing sleep over their words, wondering if maybe they were right. But now, I just scroll past them, sometimes with a small smile at how predictable they've become, like market patterns in a bull run. I've changed my routine. Instead of spending my weekends on standby for emergency babysitting calls, I've joined an exclusive book club in Manhattan. The first meeting felt strange, sitting in a boutique cafe on a Saturday morning, knowing my phone wouldn't ring with a desperate plea from one of my sisters. Last week, I booked another vacation, a luxury cruise through the Mediterranean in the spring. I didn't have to check with anyone's schedule or make sure it wouldn't conflict with someone else's needs. I just saw a good deal and took it, like a smart investment opportunity. Sometimes, in quiet moments between deals, I think about my nieces and nephews. I miss them, but not the way they were used as weapons against me. I hope that someday, when they're older, they'll understand. Maybe they'll even recognize the same patterns in their own lives and choose differently. I still have the emergency key Mom used that last day. I should probably mail it back, but something stops me each time I think about it. Maybe part of me hopes that one day they'll understand, that they'll see how their actions and expectations were unfair, how they took advantage of my love for them, that they'll realize family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to meet everyone else's needs. But I'm not waiting for that day anymore. I'm not putting my life on hold, hoping for their approval or understanding. For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first, and it feels right, like finally making the perfect investment in myself. Yesterday, I deleted the family group chat from my phone. I didn't make an announcement about it or try to explain myself. I just quietly removed myself from one more obligation, one more source of stress, like divesting from a toxic asset. Some might call this selfishness. My family certainly does. But I've learned that there's a difference between being selfish and having self-respect. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is step away from people who can't see your worth beyond what you can do for them, just like knowing when to walk away from a bad deal. I'm Audrey, and I grew up in the shadow of success. That success belonged to my older sister, Vanessa. Our suburban house was always filled with people, aunts, uncles, cousins, all drawn by the promise of my mother Eleanor's famous garden parties and the chance to see Vanessa perform. Our backyard was like a private theater, with its perfectly manicured lawn and the towering maple tree that served as a natural spotlight. I can still see my father Gerald manning the grill, the aroma of charcoal and seasoned steaks mingling with the evening air, while Mom fluttered among the guests, ensuring everyone's champagne glasses stayed full. Vanessa, darling, Aunt Patricia would inevitably call out, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter like a crystal bell, "Why don't you give us one of your lovely performances?" And just like that, all eyes would shift to my sister. Vanessa would gracefully step onto the stone patio, her golden hair catching the last rays of sunset, a mischievous glint in her hazel eyes. She'd clear her throat with theatrical flair, and then pure magic would fill the air. My Heart Will Go On was her signature piece, her voice carrying the same emotional depth as Celine Dion herself. The gathered crowd would erupt in enthusiastic applause, some wiping away tears of joy. Dad would beam with unmistakable pride, while Mom would squeeze his hand, their faces glowing with parental satisfaction. Meanwhile, I'd find myself retreating to the edges of our property, trying to blend into the shadows of the maple tree. It wasn't that I didn't want to participate, I did, desperately. But every time I attempted to sing, my voice would emerge as something between a strangled cat and a rusty door hinge. Poetry? Even worse. The words would tangle themselves into knots on my tongue, leaving me red-faced and stammering before I could finish the first verse. I'd catch snippets of conversations, relatives whispering about how different I was from Vanessa. "It's hard to believe they're sisters," they'd murmur behind their wine glasses. But it wasn't just the extended family. Mom and Dad made it crystal clear who held the spotlight in our household. While Vanessa was chauffeured between dance classes, vocal coaching, and art workshops, I was left to my own devices. Not that I complained much, I found my own sanctuary in the dusty investment and business books that lined our home library's shelves. In this world of performances and expectations, only one person truly saw me for who I was: Great Aunt Diana. She'd find me in my usual hideouts, behind the garage or tucked away in my makeshift reading nook under the maple tree, always with a business or investment book in hand. "What fascinating subject are you exploring today, Audrey?" she'd ask, carefully lowering herself onto the grass beside me. Her voice carried a warmth that made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time each day. I'd look up from my book, grateful for the interruption that, for once, didn't feel like an intrusion. "I'm reading about real estate investment strategies," I'd reply, showing her the well-worn cover of my latest find. "Did you know that property value isn't just about location? It's about understanding market trends and demographic shifts too." Diana would nod, her eyes twinkling with understanding behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "You've got a brilliant mind for business, dear. Don't ever let anyone dim that light." She'd often bring me articles about successful women in business, quietly nurturing my growing interest in finance and management. Those moments with Aunt Diana were like finding an oasis in a desert, a place where I could simply be Audrey, the girl who dreamed of building her own empire, not just the quiet sister who couldn't carry a tune. She never expected me to be anyone but myself, never compared me to Vanessa, never suggested I try harder to fit into the family's performance-oriented mold. But even Diana's unwavering support couldn't completely erase the sting of being the forgotten Thompson daughter. Every time Vanessa mastered a new song or won another local talent competition, our parents would shower her with lavish gifts: designer clothes, the latest iPhone, even a brand new laptop for her creative projects. Meanwhile, I received practical items from the clearance rack and thinly veiled suggestions about finding my place. The disparity was never more apparent than during our birthday celebrations. While Vanessa's parties were elaborate affairs with professional photographers and custom cakes, mine were often afterthoughts, marked by hastily bought cards and gifts that felt more like obligations than expressions of love. The message was clear. In the Thompson household, some stars shone brighter than others. School became my sanctuary, my personal stage where academic excellence replaced musical performances. While I might not have been Miss Popular, I discovered my true element in the classroom. I refused to be a passive observer. Instead, I approached each lesson with the same intensity Vanessa brought to her performances. "Mrs. Harrison," I'd say after advanced economics class, my voice quiet but steady, "could you explain more about market elasticity? I want to make sure I fully understand how it applies to real-world business scenarios." She'd smile, clearly pleased by my genuine interest and analytical approach. "Of course, Audrey. Your questions always show such depth of understanding," she'd respond, often staying late to discuss economic theories and their practical applications. When teachers couldn't spare extra time, I'd request reading recommendations, particularly focusing on business and investment strategies. My backpack became a mobile library, heavy with books about financial markets, property investment, and business management. I'd stay up late in my room, my desk lamp casting a small circle of light as I pored over these texts, absorbing every detail about business strategies and investment principles. While Vanessa's music drifted through the walls from her evening practice sessions, I was building my own kind of expertise, even if no one else seemed to notice or care. All this dedication began to pay off spectacularly. By senior year, I wasn't just top of my class, I was running the school's investment club and had already started a small online business reselling vintage clothing, carefully reinvesting every dollar of profit. My economics teacher even asked me to tutor struggling students, which I did during lunch breaks. Meanwhile, our house had transformed into Vanessa Central as college application season approached. Mom spent countless hours helping her perfect her portfolio for the prestigious performing arts program at Juilliard. "Oh, sweetheart, this audition piece is absolutely perfect," Mom would gush, watching Vanessa rehearse. "You're going to take Broadway by storm." I'd retreat to my room, surrounded by my business plans and investment spreadsheets, trying to ignore the familiar ache in my chest. But one evening, during yet another family dinner dominated by Vanessa's college prospects, something in me snapped. "I'm applying to Wharton's School of Business," I announced, my voice cutting through their conversation about Vanessa's upcoming auditions. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, to my absolute humiliation, they all burst into laughter. "Oh, sweetie," Mom said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes, "be realistic. We can't afford 2 college tuitions, and you're just not, well, you're not Wharton material. You should focus on something more practical. Besides, Gerald's cousin Frank is always looking for help at his diner." The confrontation, I felt like I'd been slapped. Heat rushed to my face, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment, it was pure, white-hot anger. "Not Wharton material?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Let me show you something." I stormed upstairs to my room, grabbed my portfolio filled with perfect grades, investment club achievements, and the detailed business plan for my growing online venture and returned to slam it on the dinner table, right next to Vanessa's sheet music. "Look at this," I demanded, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Straight A's in every advanced business and economics class. President of the investment club. A profitable online business I built from scratch. My SAT scores are in the top percentile. So tell me, what exactly about me isn't Wharton material? They all leaned in to examine my achievements, their eyes widening in genuine surprise. "Well, I'll be damned," Dad muttered, adjusting his glasses. "When did all this happen?" "It's been happening for years," I replied, my voice ice cold. "Not that any of you ever bothered to notice. You were too busy watching Vanessa's performances to see what I was building." Mom at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. Audrey, we had no idea you were so. But Dad cut her off. Look, it doesn't change the financial reality. We've invested everything in Vanessa's future. Her talent needs proper nurturing. There's simply nothing left for your business experiments. I stood there, staring at them, finally seeing with perfect clarity what I'd always known but never wanted to admit. In their eyes, I would always be second best, the supporting act to Vanessa's star performance. Fine, I said, gathering my portfolio with steady hands. If you won't support my dreams, I'll find another way. I always have. I turned and walked away, ignoring their calls. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I heard Mom saying, "She'll get over it. She always does." But this time was different. This time, something had fundamentally changed. The following months passed in a blur of focused determination. While Vanessa prepared for her Juilliard auditions, accompanied by tearful good luck wishes and endless family support, I threw myself into my own preparations with renewed intensity. During this time, I found myself spending more and more time at Aunt Diana's cozy Victorian house in the quieter part of town. Her home became my refuge, with its wall-to-wall bookshelves and the perpetual scent of freshly baked cookies. One afternoon, as we sat in her sunny kitchen nook sharing tea and homemade scones, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "So, Audrey," she said, stirring honey into her tea, her eyes kind but direct, "what are your plans after graduation? Have you heard back from any schools?" I stared into my teacup, watching the steam rise in delicate swirls. "I got into Wharton," I said quietly, then quickly added before she could celebrate, "but it doesn't matter. Mom and Dad won't help with tuition. They say they've spent everything on Vanessa's performing arts education." Diana set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "Tell me, dear, how much would you need for the first year?" I pulled out a carefully prepared spreadsheet from my bag. I'd been carrying it everywhere, running the numbers over and over. Even with the partial scholarship I received, I'd need about $45,000 for the first year. I've saved $12,000 from my online business, but... "Audrey," Diana interrupted, reaching across the table to take my hand, "I've been watching you work toward this dream for years. Your dedication, your intelligence, your business sense, they're extraordinary. I have some savings that I've been holding onto for something worthwhile. I can't think of anything more worthwhile than investing in your future." I stared at her, hardly daring to breathe. "Aunt Diana, I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," she said firmly. "Consider it an investment, if that makes you feel better. When you're a successful businesswoman, you can pay me back with interest." She winked, and I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. The reality of what she was offering hit me like a tidal wave. I burst into tears, overwhelmed by this unexpected lifeline. "Thank you," I sobbed, moving around the table to hug her. "Thank you so much, Aunt Diana. I promise I won't let you down." Time seemed to accelerate after that conversation. Before I knew it, I was walking across the stage at graduation, my honors cords heavy around my neck. As I scanned the crowd, I saw Aunt Diana beaming proudly, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. My parents were there too, their expressions a mixture of pride and discomfort. That evening, as I organized my college acceptance materials, Mom appeared in my doorway. "Audrey, honey," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "your father's cousin Frank called again about that waitressing position. You really should consider it, it's such a stable job." I looked up from my papers, my back straightening. "Actually, Mom, I won't be needing that job. I'm going to Wharton in the fall." Dad materialized behind her, his face darkening. "And how exactly do you plan to pay for that?" "Aunt Diana is helping me," I said firmly, meeting his gaze. "She believes in my potential." The silence that followed was broken by Dad's explosive reaction. "Absolutely not," he thundered, his face flushing red. "If Diana has money to spare, it should go to Vanessa. She needs a car for her internship at the theater next year." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice razor sharp. "This is my chance to build a future, to make something of myself." "Don't be selfish, Audrey," Mom chimed in, wringing her hands. "Your sister's career needs that support more than you need another degree. Business degrees are a dime a dozen, but talent like Vanessa's is rare." "No," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "This is my opportunity, my future. Aunt Diana chose to invest in me, and I'm accepting." End of discussion. From that moment on, the atmosphere at home became unbearable. My parents alternated between icy silence and passive-aggressive comments. After a particularly nasty argument where Dad suggested I was stealing from Vanessa's future, I called Aunt Diana. "Pack your bags, sweetheart," she said without hesitation after hearing my tearful explanation. "You're moving in with me until college starts." The next morning, I loaded my belongings into a rideshare, watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror. As we pulled up to Aunt Diana's Victorian house, with its welcoming porch and blooming garden, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The summer stretched ahead of me, full of possibility and free from the constant shadow of being the other daughter. Thanks to my academic excellence and Aunt Diana's support, I stepped onto Wharton's campus that fall with a mixture of excitement and determination. My first business strategy lecture felt like coming home. Every word resonated with the dreams I'd been nurturing for years. Meanwhile, Vanessa was starting her final year at Juilliard. I rarely heard from her or my parents, but through Aunt Diana's updates, I learned that things weren't going as planned. Then, about a month into the semester, my phone lit up with Diana's name. "Audrey, dear," she said, her voice carrying an unusual tension, "you might want to sit down for this." My heart raced as she shared the latest family drama. Vanessa had suddenly dropped out of Juilliard, announcing she was pregnant. "Don't worry about it," she'd apparently told our shocked parents, tossing her golden hair with characteristic confidence. "The father is from an extremely wealthy family. We'll be getting married soon." But the story took an unexpected turn. It emerged that Vanessa had been involved with multiple men, including her wealthy boyfriend's best friend. When the truth came out, her boyfriend's promises of marriage and financial security evaporated. Now they weren't even sure who the father was. I sat in my dorm room, phone pressed to my ear, torn between disbelief and a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me felt a twisted satisfaction the golden child had fallen from grace. But mostly, I felt a profound sadness for my sister and the mess she'd created. The saga continued to unfold over the following months. Through Aunt Diana's regular updates, I learned that a DNA test eventually confirmed her ex-boyfriend was indeed the father. Instead of the fairy tale wedding Vanessa had envisioned, she received a coldly negotiated child support agreement. The final irony? She ended up taking that waitressing job at Uncle Frank's diner, the very position my parents had tried to push on me. As I hung up after each call with Diana, I felt an increasingly complex mixture of emotions. The petty part of me wanted to gloat, to remind my family of their mistake in dismissing my potential. But more than anything, I felt grateful for the path I'd chosen and the aunt who'd helped make it possible. The years at Wharton passed in a whirlwind of business cases, financial models, and leadership seminars. Before I knew it, I was walking across another stage, this time receiving my business degree with honors. In the audience, Aunt Diana beamed with pride, tears streaming down her face. Thanks to my outstanding academic record and several successful internships, I secured a position as a junior manager at the Lux Heights, one of the most prestigious real estate development firms in the city. The starting salary exceeded my wildest expectations, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly successful. With my first substantial paycheck, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I visited the most exclusive electronics store in the city and purchased the latest iPhone for Aunt Diana. Her face lit up when I presented it to her. "Oh, Audrey," she gasped, turning the sleek device over in her hands, "this is far too extravagant." I smiled, already pulling out my own phone. "Not at all. Now, let me show you how to use all the features." Over the next few weeks, I taught her about social media, especially WhatsApp, which became our primary way of staying connected. She took to it surprisingly quickly, particularly loving the voice message feature. Soon, our daily communications were filled with her warm voice-sharing updates about her garden, her book club, and her famous apple pie experiments. Then one day, as I was reviewing property development plans in my office, my phone buzzed with my mother's name, a rare occurrence these days. "Audrey," her voice was hesitant, we were hoping you might come over to talk." After a long pause, I agreed to a Sunday visit. Standing on my childhood home's porch that weekend, I felt strangely detached. Inside, I found my parents, Vanessa, and my young niece whom I'd never met. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile, as I'd feared. "You look good, kiddo," Dad said, his voice gruff but carrying a hint of warmth. "We hear you're doing exceptionally well at Lux Heights." I nodded, maintaining my professional composure. "Yes, I'm now managing several major development projects." Mom cleared her throat nervously. That's wonderful, dear. Actually, that's part of why we wanted to talk to you." Over the next hour, they attempted to apologize for their past treatment, admitting they'd been wrong to dismiss my potential. Then came the real reason for the reunion. "Audrey," Mom said, glancing at Vanessa, who was bouncing her daughter on her knee, "we were wondering if you might be able to help Vanessa get a position at your company. She's been struggling at the diner and with little Emma to think about." I studied my sister, who still wouldn't meet my eyes directly. "I'll see what I can do," I said carefully. "But I can't make any promises." True to my word, I spoke with our HR department about an administrative position for Vanessa. To my surprise, she excelled in the role. She was punctual, efficient, and her natural charm worked well with clients. As weeks passed, I found myself gradually relaxing around her. We weren't best friends, but we developed a cordial professional relationship. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, an unexpected opportunity arose. Mr. Richards, the CEO of Lux Heights, called me into his office. My heart raced until I saw his broad smile. "Audrey, how would you feel about heading up our new international division?" Soon, I was overseeing not just local developments, but projects across 3 continents. My days became a whirlwind of virtual meetings, site visits, and strategic planning sessions. It was exhausting but exhilarating, everything I'd ever dreamed of. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, and suddenly I found myself with more money than I knew what to do with. That's when the calls from my parents started becoming more frequent. At first, it was just minor things. "The roof is leaking," Mom would say hesitantly. "We were wondering if you might be able to help out a little." I surprised myself by saying yes, finding satisfaction in being able to solve their problems with a simple bank transfer. It started with the roof repairs, then progressed to a new heating system, and before long, I was funding their entire home renovation. As their financial situation improved thanks to my monthly support, the familiar family parties resumed. But this time, the dynamic was different. "Have you heard about Audrey's latest project?" Mom would proudly tell relatives. She's developing luxury properties in Dubai. We're so proud of her. I'd occasionally catch Vanessa's eye across the room, and she'd give me a small, knowing smile. She was doing well too, having been promoted to senior client relations manager. My girls, Dad would say, an arm around each of us, both making their old man proud. Part of me wanted to remind them of their past dismissiveness, but a larger part basked in their approval, something I'd craved for so long. One Sunday afternoon, everything changed. I was reviewing development proposals in my home office when I received a WhatsApp message from Aunt Diana. "Listen to this," her text read, followed by a voice memo from the previous night's family gathering, one I'd missed due to a business trip. I pressed play, expecting to hear typical family chatter. Instead, my mother's slightly intoxicated voice filled my ears. "And Audrey, that ungrateful girl," she was saying, "she barely helps us at all. You'd think with all her success she could do more for her family." "That's right," Dad's voice chimed in, equally slurred. "We're getting by thanks to Vanessa's hard work. Audrey just got lucky with that company. She's riding on their success, that's all." The recording continued, with various relatives murmuring in agreement. Vanessa remained silent in the background, neither defending me nor joining in. My hands trembled as I scrolled through subsequent messages where my parents desperately begged Diana to delete the recording. Diana's response was clear: "I may be old, but I know exactly what I'm doing by sharing this. It's time Audrey saw the truth about how you really view her success." I sat there, staring at my phone, my mind replaying the voices over and over. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined possible. After everything, the monthly payments, the house renovations, the generous holiday gifts, they still saw me as nothing more than a lucky opportunist. With trembling fingers, I dialed Diana's number. "Oh, Audrey dear," she answered, her voice full of gentle concern. "I take it you've heard the recording." "Yes," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "I can't believe it, Aunt Diana. All this time, even after everything." "They've always been like this, sweetheart," she replied, anger evident in her usually calm voice. "You just haven't been around to hear it. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you needed to know the truth." We talked for hours, my emotional state cycling through shock, anger, and grief. As evening fell over the city skyline outside my penthouse windows, I reached a decision. "I'm cutting them off," I told Diana, my voice finding its strength again. "No more money, no more help. They've shown their true colors." The days that followed were surreal. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Their words from the recording played on repeat in my mind, like a toxic melody I couldn't shake. After a week of silence, I sent them a brief, professional text: "I've heard the recording. I now understand your true feelings about my success. Don't contact me regarding financial matters again. All support stops immediately." Their responses flooded in instantly. At first, they were apologetic. "Sweetie, we didn't mean any of it. We were just talking nonsense." But as days passed and I maintained my silence, their tone shifted dramatically. "We're your parents. You owe us. How dare you abandon your family?" Each message confirmed that I'd made the right decision. Vanessa, surprisingly, remained professional at work. "I'm staying neutral," she told me during a project meeting. "This is between you and them." I nodded, appreciating her stance, even if part of me wished she'd acknowledged the truth she'd witnessed firsthand. As weeks turned into months, my relationship with Aunt Diana grew even stronger. Our Sunday video calls became the highlight of my week. She'd share stories about her latest gardening triumphs or show me her experiments with new bread recipes, providing a welcome sense of genuine family connection amidst the chaos. "You're doing the right thing," Audrey, she'd reassure me during moments of doubt. Don't let them manipulate you again. True family supports each other without keeping score. To my surprise, other relatives began reaching out. Cousin Rachel, who'd always been kind at family gatherings, sent a heartfelt email. I heard the recording, Audrey. I want you to know that I think you're incredible. What you've achieved, how you've handled everything, you're an inspiration. Don't let anyone diminish your success. Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother, called unexpectedly. Kid, I've watched you grow from that quiet girl with business books to this amazing woman. Your parents are fools if they can't see how special you are. You've got real family in your corner, remember that. As the year drew to a close, Mr. Richards called me into his office again. My heart was steady this time. I'd learned to trust my abilities. Audrey, he said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smile, I'm retiring next year. I want you to take over as CEO of Lux Heights. I stood there, momentarily speechless. Finally, I managed to ask, are you certain about this? He nodded, his expression serious but pleased. I've never been more sure of anything. You've transformed this company, Audrey. Our international division has flourished under your leadership. It's time you took the reins completely. As I left his office, looking out over the city skyline from our top-floor headquarters, I realized something profound. That quiet girl who'd hidden behind business books had become exactly who she'd always dreamed of being. Not because of family connections or luck, but through determination, intelligence, and hard work. Success, I realized, wasn't about proving anything to anyone else, it was about being true to yourself and your vision. The little girl who'd been overlooked had grown into a woman who couldn't be ignored, and better yet, she'd done it on her own terms. Aunt Diana insisted on throwing a celebration dinner for my CEO appointment. As we sat in my penthouse, sharing her famous apple pie and champagne, she pulled out an old photo album I'd never seen before. Look at this, she said, pointing to a photo of a young girl curled up with a business book under the maple tree. I took this the day you first told me you wanted to run your own company. You were 12, but your eyes held such determination. I stared at the image, remembering that day clearly. I was reading about real estate development, I recalled, smiling. Everyone else was watching Vanessa's backyard concert, but I was dreaming about building skyscrapers. And now look at you, Diana said proudly, gesturing to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, the city skyline glittering beyond them. You didn't just dream about skyscrapers, you're building them. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had spent years investing in Vanessa's performances, believing she was their ticket to success. Instead, their overlooked daughter had become the one thing they'd never expected, a self-made woman who'd achieved everything they'd dreamed of, and more. As I hugged Diana goodbye that evening, I felt completely at peace with my decisions. The recording had been a blessing in disguise, forcing me to finally see the truth I'd been avoiding. Success wasn't about gaining my parents' approval or proving them wrong, it was about being true to myself and my vision. Standing at my window later that night, watching the city lights twinkle below, I smiled to myself. The quiet girl who'd hidden in the shadows had stepped into her own spotlight, not on a backyard stage, but in the world of business she'd always dreamed of. And this time, the applause was all her own.